Have you ever felt trapped, hopeless, and unsure of which path to take? Imagine being a baby, thrown into a river, with your fate in the hands of strangers. This was the painful reality of Moses, a boy destined to change the course of history. Amidst despair and oppression, Moses was found and adopted by a pharaoh's daughter, growing up in a palace while his people suffered. His journey was not easy. He faced doubts, fears, and enormous challenges. But through it all, Moses discovered an inner strength and a greater purpose, guided by a divine voice. Prepare yourself for a profound and moving journey through the life of Moses, from his humble beginnings to his role as leader of a nation. Discover how he faced his own insecurities, overcame immense challenges, and brought hope and liberation to his people. This is the story of a man who, through faith and courage, turned adversity into victory. But before starting the video, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, because here you will be delving deeper into the stories of important biblical characters and understanding more and more how these stories will change your view of the Bible. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, as evidenced by his father's gift of a coat of many colors, a special gift that set him apart from his brothers. Each time Joseph wore this coat, his brothers would feel their jealousy grow, for Jacob's preference was clear. But it wasn't just the coat that fueled their jealousy. One day, Joseph had a dream that he shared with his brothers. In the dream, they were in the field binding sheaves of wheat, and Joseph's sheaf stood up, while his brothers' sheaves bowed down to him. The brothers, already resentful, became even more offended. "Do you think you will rule over us?" Their hatred grew. Soon after, Joseph had another dream. This time, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. He told not only his brothers but also his father. Even Jacob, who loved him, rebuked him. "Do you think I, your mother, and your brothers will bow down to you?" Although intrigued, Jacob kept the dream in his heart, but his brothers were even more furious. To them, Joseph was putting himself above everyone else, and this made them ready to do something against him. Joseph's dreams were not just ordinary visions, but the foreshadowing of a future he had never imagined. However, his brothers did not see this, only the pride and arrogance they believed Joseph displayed. Tensions between Joseph and his brothers reached a boiling point. When Joseph was sent by his father Jacob to check on his brothers in the fields, they saw him from afar and plotted against him. "Here comes the dreamer," they muttered, planning to kill him and rid themselves of their dreams. Reuben, the eldest brother, intervened, suggesting that they simply throw him into an empty cistern, intending to rescue him later. As soon as Joseph arrived, his brothers attacked him, tore off his colorful robe, and threw him into the well. While they were eating, they spotted a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants on their way to Egypt. Judah suggested selling him into slavery. Everyone agreed, and Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. To cover up their crime, the brothers smeared Joseph's robe with animal blood and took it to Jacob, who, upon seeing it, believed that his son had been killed by a wild beast. In the midst of great pain, Jacob wept inconsolably for Joseph, while his brothers bore the weight of guilt. After being sold into slavery by his brothers, Joseph was purchased by Potiphar, an official of the Pharaoh in Egypt. Even in his new and difficult situation, Joseph stood out for his work ethic and dedication. Potiphar soon entrusted him with the management of his entire household. Everything prospered under Joseph's management, and he became a very valuable employee. However, Potiphar's wife became attracted to Joseph and tried to seduce him repeatedly. Joseph, maintaining his integrity, refused her advances and explained that he could not betray Potiphar's trust and sin against God. Now, I want to know from you, how do you think Joseph managed to maintain his faith and strength in the face of so much betrayal and difficulty? What would you do if you were in his place? Leave your comment below and share your opinion on this intense story of overcoming and faith. One day, Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him again, and when she was rejected, she grabbed him and took Joseph's tunic, who fled the scene. She used the tunic as evidence to falsely accuse her, claiming that Joseph had tried to assault her. Potiphar, believing the accusation, sent Joseph to prison. In prison, Joseph faced yet another injustice, but he maintained his dignity and faith. His story was far from over, and he was about to face new trials and opportunities. After earning Potiphar's trust and managing his household well, Joseph faced a great challenge. Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him repeatedly, but Joseph always refused, maintaining his integrity. One day, she grabbed him by the tunic, and when Joseph fled, she left the tunic behind. Potiphar's wife used the tunic as evidence to falsely accuse her, claiming that Joseph had tried to assault her. Potiphar, believing his wife's story, was furious and sent Joseph to prison without investigating further. In prison, Joseph faced more hardships, but he maintained his dignity and faith. He began helping the other prisoners and soon gained the trust of the prison warden, who placed him in charge of all the inmates. Joseph, even in his difficult situation, continued to be an example of character and trustworthiness. While still in prison, Joseph had the chance to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. He correctly predicted that the cupbearer would be restored to his position and the baker would be executed. In time, Joseph's dreams came true exactly as he had predicted. 2 years later, Pharaoh had 2 disturbing dreams. In the first, he saw 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 lean cows. In the second, 7 robust heads of wheat were being eaten by 7 thin, dry heads. Pharaoh was desperate for an interpretation, and the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Joseph was summoned from prison and explained that the dreams foretold 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. He advised Pharaoh to store food during the years of plenty to prepare for the shortage. Impressed by Joseph's interpretation and wisdom, Pharaoh appointed him administrator of Egypt, in charge of managing the storage and distribution of food. Joseph went from being a prisoner to the second most powerful man in Egypt, preparing for a crucial role in the country's survival. After interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, Joseph was appointed governor of Egypt. Pharaoh, impressed by his wisdom, gave Joseph fine clothes, a gold necklace, and made him the second most powerful man in the country. Joseph immediately began implementing the plan he had suggested, to store food during the 7 years of plenty in preparation for the famine that would follow. He oversaw the construction of storehouses and organized the collection and storage of grain. When the 7 years of famine began, Egypt was well prepared. The crisis affected many neighboring nations, who came to Egypt in search of food. Joseph managed the distribution of food effectively, ensuring the country's survival. During the famine, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt in search of food. They did not recognize Joseph, but he recognized them. Joseph then tested his brothers to see if they had changed. Eventually, he revealed his identity, forgave them, and reunited with his family, showing that the dreams he had had years before were coming true. During a severe famine, Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt to buy food, following news that the country had sufficient grain. Jacob, fearing for Benjamin's safety, did not send him with his brothers. Upon arriving in Egypt, the brothers were taken to Joseph, who was now the governor and in charge of distributing food. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. To test his brothers, Joseph accused them of being spies and kept Simeon as a prisoner while sending the others back with food, demanding that they bring Benjamin on their next visit. Back in Canaan, the brothers told Jacob what had happened. Despite hesitation, Jacob finally agreed to send Benjamin with his brothers due to the food shortage. On the second trip to Egypt, with Benjamin present, Joseph welcomed them and finally revealed his identity. Moved, he forgave his brothers and invited the entire family to move to Egypt, ensuring that they would have food for the remainder of the famine. After their first trip to Egypt, Joseph demanded that his brothers bring Benjamin with them on their next visit to prove the truth of their words. When the food ran out, Jacob reluctantly allowed Benjamin to go with them to Egypt. Upon their arrival in Egypt, Joseph prepared a feast for his brothers and watched Benjamin with interest. After the feast, Joseph placed his silver cup in Benjamin's sack without his knowledge. When the brothers left, Joseph sent his officers to accuse them of theft. The shocked brothers returned to Egypt and discovered the cup in Benjamin's sack. Joseph announced that Benjamin should remain in Egypt as a slave. Desperate, the brothers begged for mercy, and Judah offered to take Benjamin's place, explaining the suffering of their father, Jacob. Moved by Judah's sincerity and sacrifice, Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers, forgave them, and was reunited with them. He invited the whole family to move to Egypt, where they could live well during the years of famine. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video, because that way YouTube will always recommend our latest videos to you and you will continue to connect with Bible stories like this one. After Benjamin's ordeal, Joseph asked everyone else to leave his presence. Only he and his brothers remained. With a mixture of emotion and control, Joseph finally revealed his true identity. "I am Joseph, the brother you sold into slavery." The brothers were stunned and afraid, imagining the punishment they might face. But Joseph reassured them, explaining that there was no hard feelings. He told them how everything that had happened was part of God's plan to save lives during the famine that was raging in the region. Joseph told his brothers about his journey from slavery to becoming governor of Egypt and how his dreams had been fulfilled. He then sent them back to Canaan with wagons and provisions to bring their father, Jacob, and his family to Egypt. When Jacob heard the revelation, he was initially shocked, but he quickly accepted the news and prepared to go to Egypt. The reunion between Jacob and Joseph was filled with emotion and joy, marking the beginning of a new era of security and prosperity for the family in Egypt. After Joseph's revelation, he asked his brothers to return to Canaan to find their father, Jacob. Joseph sent wagons and provisions to help with the journey. When the brothers arrived in Canaan and told Jacob that Joseph was alive and was the governor of Egypt, he was initially skeptical. But when he saw the gifts and wagons that Joseph had sent, Jacob believed them and decided to go to Egypt. Jacob and his family set out for Egypt and were warmly welcomed by Joseph upon their arrival. The reunion between Jacob and Joseph was filled with emotion, with both crying and hugging. Jacob thanked God for finding his son again. Joseph introduced his family to Pharaoh, who offered them the best land in Egypt, the region of Goshen. Jacob's family settled there and lived well during the years of famine. What a touching moment, huh? After so much suffering and separation, Joseph and Jacob were finally reunited in a scene filled with tears and joy. What would you do if you were in Joseph's shoes? Leave in the comments what touched you most about this story and how you would react if you saw someone you loved again after so many years. And so we come to the end of Joseph's incredible story. From his days as a young dreamer, through moments of pain, betrayal, and injustice, to becoming the great ruler of Egypt, Joseph's life shows us the power of faith, resilience, and forgiveness. He could have become bitter, but he chose to trust God, even in the most difficult moments. And in the end, he not only saved himself, but also his family and thousands of people. The lesson here is clear: no matter how difficult the path may be, never lose hope. God is always working, even when we don't understand what is happening. If Joseph was able to turn so much suffering into blessing, who knows what can happen in our own lives if we trust and move forward. If you enjoyed following this story with us, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, because here we will always be publishing new stories like these. Until the next video, I hope to see you there.